I'm 70 years old, and I never imagined my twilight years would be spent in a silent war against my own flesh and blood. My name is Arthur Sterling, and for my entire life, I've nurtured a business that those closest to me now seek to devour. My company, Sterling Provisions, was born in a small, sun-drenched kitchen on the edge of Willow Creek. 42 years ago, Eleanor, my late wife, and I cashed in our savings to buy our first batch of premium fruits for our artisanal jams. I can still picture us, sitting on the worn linoleum floor of our first tiny storefront, sipping cheap champagne from mismatched mugs, dreaming of what was to come. "We're going to have our preserves on the shelves of every gourmet shop in the state," I declared. Eleanor looked at me with that signature blend of affection and gentle mockery that only she possessed. "Let's start by selling out at the farmer's market, my dreamer," she'd reply. But I saw the belief sparkle in her eyes. Eleanor never saw the day our little company began supplying specialty foods to high-end retailers across the country. She was taken from me 6 years ago. A brain aneurysm, swift and merciless. One moment she was laughing at a joke on the television, the next she was gone. The doctors said it was painless, a small mercy in a sea of grief. Until her last day, she was the heart of the company, tasting every new recipe, managing the finances with a meticulous hand. "Don't you dare let the quality slip when I'm gone, Arthur," she'd say, her fingers, dusted with flour, adjusting a label on a jar. She never comprehended that the most neglected thing after her passing wouldn't be the business, but my bond with our only son, Leo. Leo grew up with a comfort and privilege I'd only dreamed of at his age. Perhaps that was our fundamental error. Eleanor and I were so determined to shield him from the struggles we faced. He received a top-tier education, but never showed a flicker of interest in the family business. After graduating, he drifted between tech startups, never planting roots for more than a year or two. Eleanor always made excuses for him. "He's finding his path, Arthur. Just give him time." When she passed, Leo was a comfort for a time. He'd visit, bring takeout, and talk about his latest venture in digital strategy. I was glad he seemed to be finding his footing. Yet, a part of me knew his renewed attention coincided with our company landing a major online distribution deal. He'd casually ask if we needed help with our online presence, but I was managing fine. Our reputation was built on quality and word of mouth, the old-fashioned way. After the funeral, Leo's visits dwindled. From weekly to monthly to only major holidays. I didn't push. I was never a father who demanded attention. I immersed myself in work, had dinner with friends, and tried to patch the gaping hole Eleanor's absence had left in my life. I went on a few dates, but no one could hold a candle to her. That all shifted 3 years ago when Leo announced his engagement. He brought his fiancée, Isabella Rossi, to my home for dinner. I recall that evening with chilling clarity. Her raven hair was styled in an immaculate chignon. Her silk dress was a shade of emerald green that seemed too severe for a casual dinner, and her eyes, sharp and assessing, scanned my living room like an appraiser. "What a charming home, Mr. Sterling," she said, her gaze lingering on a landscape painting Eleanor and I had purchased on our honeymoon. "It has such vintage character." There was a faint, condescending note in her tone, but I dismissed it as nerves. Leo was gazing at her with pure adoration, and I resolved to give her a chance. Eleanor always chided me for being too quick to judge. At the wedding, Isabella was the picture of perfection, charming the guests, saying all the right things, and even dabbing a tear when I toasted the happy couple. Her parents, Marcus and Sylvia Rossi, were a polished, reserved pair. Marcus, a self-described business consultant, spent the evening discussing the perils of running a legacy business in the modern age. "How are things holding up, Arthur?" he asked as we shared a table. "Leo tells me you're in the gourmet food space." "Artisanal provisions," I corrected. "And business is excellent, despite the challenges." "I imagine you're looking forward to a well-earned retirement," he said smoothly. "At your age, it's wise to pass the torch to the next generation." I offered a non-committal smile, thinking little of his words at the time. Now, I recognize it as the first tremor before the earthquake. After the wedding, Leo and Isabella became more frequent visitors, typically for Sunday brunch. Isabella would arrive with an exotic pastry and a barrage of questions about my health, delivered with a strange intensity, as if hoping for a grim report. "How's your memory been, Arthur? Leo mentioned you forgot a supplier's name the other day." "It was a momentary lapse. Nothing serious. You have to be so careful at your age. My father always says stress is a silent killer for entrepreneurs. Perhaps you should consider slowing down." I grew adept at deflecting these conversations. My dislike for Isabella simmered, but for Leo's sake, I maintained a polite facade. I even offered Leo a management position, hoping that immersion in the business might spark a genuine interest. "Dad, you know that's not my world," he replied with a dismissive wave. "I'm a strategist. Sterling Provisions needs a fresh marketing approach, not another cook. Let me connect you with a great agency." That was the end of that. But a week later, Leo called and asked to meet at my office. He arrived alone, a rarity, and began probing into the company's operations, our supply chain, our profit margins. I answered his questions, naively believing he was finally curious. "What's your 5-year growth plan?" he asked, scrolling through our product list on his tablet. "Consistency, quality, and cultivating our relationships with clients." "That's archaic, Dad. You need influencer marketing, targeted ads, a subscription model. Your website looks like it was designed in the early 2000s. Our customers value authenticity, not slick marketing. But you're missing out on a massive demographic." Leo argued with a passion I'd never seen him apply to the business before. "Look, I can help. I know a firm that can do a complete rebranding, new logo, packaging, a whole new digital strategy. And the cost?" He quoted a figure that made my jaw tighten. "That's a significant investment, Leo. I'm not convinced we need a total overhaul." "You just don't get it," he said, frustration coloring his voice. "If you don't adapt, you'll become irrelevant." He left in a huff, and at the next Sunday brunch, Isabella's demeanor was glacial. I saw them exchange loaded glances when they thought I wasn't looking. Their visits grew sparse again, but their inquiries about the business became more pointed. It was during this period that a profound weariness began to settle in my bones. At first, I blamed it on age. Then came the headaches and moments of dizziness. My deputy, Frank Miller, who'd been with me since we were still making jam in my kitchen, noticed my fatigue. "Arthur, you need to see a doctor," he insisted after I stumbled during a warehouse inspection. "You look drained." I waved him off. We old-timers don't rush to the clinic for every little ailment. But when I woke one morning with a blinding headache and a terrifying numbness down my left side, I had no choice but to call for an ambulance. The hospital confirmed I'd had a minor stroke. They ran a battery of tests and said I needed extensive observation and physical therapy. I waited a day before calling Leo, not wanting to alarm him. "Dad, why didn't you call me immediately?" His voice was laced with genuine panic. "We would have been there." "It's fine, son. Just a small scare. The doctors have it under control." An hour later, Leo and Isabella were at my bedside. She bustled around, adjusting my pillows and lecturing the nurse on my dietary needs, while Leo asked about the prognosis. "They're not certain. There could be some lingering cognitive effects. I'll need rehab." "Rehab?" Isabella interjected from across the room. "That's very serious. You'll need the best care. My aunt's friend went to a wonderful facility. I'll get the details." That evening, they were the picture of concerned family. Isabella even offered to stay the night, but I declined. I was accustomed to my own space and found her fussing suffocating. They left, promising to return the next day. They did return, but with Marcus and Sylvia in tow. Leo's in-laws made themselves comfortable in my private room. Sylvia inspected the flower arrangements while Marcus launched his offensive. "Arthur, what's the situation with the business? Who's in charge while you're incapacitated?" "Frank is perfectly capable. He's been my second in command for 30 years. "But he's not family," Marcus said, shaking his head. "In a crisis like this, you need a clear line of succession." I saw Leo and Isabella exchange a significant look. "I'm not dying, Marcus. It's a temporary setback." Of course. But one must be prepared. As a consultant, I advise clients to plan for every contingency. Too many people delay crucial decisions, and then it's too late. The conversation that evening was a relentless assault on my health and the state of my business. Isabella remarked on the importance of having affairs in order, and Leo showed a sudden, intense interest in the company's day-to-day management. "Maybe I should spend some time at the office, get acquainted with the team," he suggested. "It is a family business, after all." I agreed, wanting to believe my son was finally ready to step up. The next day, Leo appeared at the office. I had Frank give him a tour, explaining our processes, our current contracts. He asked sharp, detailed questions, taking notes on his phone. He was particularly interested in our financials, our revenue, profit margins, and largest accounts. "What's the ownership structure of the company?" he asked when we were alone in my office. "Is it a sole proprietorship?" "It's an LLC. I'm the sole member. No other shareholders at all." Not even minority stakeholders? No, just me. Your mother was a co-owner, but her share transferred to me upon her death. He nodded, tapping another note into his phone. I paid little heed to his interrogation at the time, assuming it was the due diligence of a son finally taking an interest in his inheritance. A week later, the full test results were in. The stroke had caused some minor but measurable damage. My doctor spoke of cognitive deficits, executive function impairment, and the need for a long, arduous recovery. The path ahead will be challenging, Arthur, he said gently. I called Leo immediately after. The recovery will take months, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. It's more serious than we thought. There was a pause on the line, then the muffled sound of whispering, as if Leo had covered the receiver to confer with someone. Dad, we're on our way, he said finally. Don't you worry about a thing. They arrived within the hour. Isabella was wearing a sharp business suit, looking more like she was attending a hostile takeover than visiting her ailing father-in-law. She sat opposite me, her hands folded neatly on her lap. Arthur, she began, in a tone one might use with a confused child, Leo and I are deeply concerned. A stroke is a major medical event. You need complete rest, zero stress. That's right, Leo chimed in. Which is why we think it's best for you to step away from the business for a while. I can take over management until you're back on your feet. I stared at my son, searching for any sign that this was a joke. Leo, who had always dismissed the business, now wanted to run it. You have no experience in this industry, I said as gently as I could. Frank is managing things perfectly. Dad, I'm your son, he pleaded. This is our family's legacy, and my background in strategy is exactly what the company needs to innovate. I'll be back to work after my recovery. There's no need for such drastic changes. Isabella leaned forward, her eyes like chips of ice. Arthur, you're not grasping the severity of this. You're 70 years old, and you've had a stroke. The doctors are talking about months, maybe years, of recovery. The company cannot be rudderless for that long. Frank is an employee, she cut in sharply. Leo is your only son, your heir. It is his right and his duty to take the helm during this difficult time. I looked at my son, who stared at the floor. He had always been pliable. Eleanor called it a gentle nature, but I saw it as a lack of conviction. It was clear now that these were not his words. They were Isabella's, spoken through his mouth. I will consider your offer, I said, to end the draining conversation. I need to rest. They left, but the following day Leo returned alone. He looked racked with guilt, hesitating in the doorway before entering. Dad, I'm sorry about yesterday. Isabella is just worried. We all are. I nodded, too weary to argue. Leo sat beside me, his tone shifting. You know, I realize I never showed much interest in the company. Mom always said it was your passion, and I didn't want to intrude. But now, with you being sick, I feel a sense of duty. This is what you and Mom built. I don't want to see it fall into the hands of an outsider. His words sounded reasonable, and for a fleeting moment, I almost believed in his sincerity. But then I remembered his pointed questions about the company's legal structure, Isabella's insistence, and Marcus Rossi's probing. Leo, I appreciate the thought, I said. But let's postpone this discussion until I'm further along in my recovery. My focus now must be on my health. He nodded, but a flicker of disappointment crossed his face. As he left, he turned at the door. Dad, you know we're here for you, right? Whatever happens. It was the first time the chilling thought took root, that behind the facade of concern, something far more sinister was at play. And the more I replayed their recent behavior, the stronger my conviction grew that my son and his wife were not trying to help me, but to replace me. The Willow Creek Rehabilitation Center welcomed me with its hushed corridors and the faint scent of lemon polish. The nurse, a cheerful woman with a kind smile, processed my admission and showed me to my room. It was a spacious single, overlooking a tranquil garden. You get some rest now, Mr. Sterling, she said, helping me settle in. Dr. Evans will be by later to discuss your therapy plan. Rest was impossible. My mind was a vortex of conversations, of Isabella's sharp glances and Leo's sudden, intense interest in finance. It all felt rehearsed, a performance for my benefit. But I couldn't yet see the final act. Dr. Evans, a compassionate woman with kind eyes, outlined the grueling path ahead. Intensive physical, occupational, and speech therapy. The goal is to regain as much function as possible, she explained, but a full recovery is not guaranteed. We need to be realistic, Mr. Sterling. The first few months are critical. Months. It felt like a lifetime to leave my company in limbo, especially with vultures circling. Frank visited that evening. He brought a basket of fruit from our suppliers, the latest sales reports, and a comforting sense of normalcy. "Everything's running smoothly, boss," he said, taking a seat by my bed. "The new contract with Urban Fare is finalized, and their first order is bigger than we projected." Frank had been with me from the very beginning. He'd started as a teenager packing boxes, and had risen through the ranks to become my indispensable right hand. Eleanor used to say that Frank was the son she'd always secretly wished for, loyal, hard-working, and utterly decent. "Frank," I said, my voice low, "I need to talk to you about Leo and Isabella." His expression immediately turned serious. "Is everything all right?" I recounted their strange behavior, their sudden obsession with the business, and their insistent offers to take over. "They're planning something, Frank. I can feel it in my gut." He stroked his chin, deep in thought. "Leo stopped by the office again yesterday. He was asking about corporate governance, about who has decision-making authority in your absence. Said he wanted to be prepared for any eventuality." "What did you tell him?" "Only that I have power of attorney to handle daily operations, but all major strategic decisions still require your approval." "And his reaction?" He seemed frustrated. We sat in silence, the implications hanging heavy in the air. "What's our move, boss?" "For now, nothing. Just keep your eyes and ears open, and let me know every single thing that happens at the office." The next morning, a young therapist named Chloe came to start my physical therapy. She was bright and encouraging, pushing me through the painful, frustrating exercises. "You're doing great, Mr. Sterling," she'd say, even when I could barely lift my arm. Later that day, as I was resting, the door opened and Leo and Isabella swept in. Leo looked anxious, but Isabella was as composed as ever in a tailored pantsuit. "Dad, how are you feeling?" Leo asked, perching on the edge of my bed. "We just heard you were moved to the rehab facility." "Who told you?" "I hadn't called anyone." "Frank," Isabella answered smoothly. "He was right to let us know. We're your family." "Frank." That was odd. He hadn't mentioned it, but perhaps he called them after our conversation. "The therapy is tough," I said. "It's a long road." "How long will you be here?" Leo asked. "A few weeks, maybe more." Then continued therapy at home. That look passed between them again. A silent, unnerving communication. They were up to something. But what? A few days later, my old friend and corporate lawyer, Gerald Vance, came to visit. Gerald was a tall, stoic man with a mind like a steel trap. We'd known each other for over 40 years. "You look like hell, Arthur," he said, forgoing any pleasantries. "And you still have the bedside manner of a drill sergeant," I retorted with a weak grin. Gerald pulled a folder from his briefcase. "I've drafted a more robust power of attorney for Frank. It gives him full operational control, signing contracts, managing accounts, everything short of selling the company or altering the ownership. That still requires your signature." I reviewed the document and signed it. "The will is another matter," Gerald continued. "To make changes, we'll need witnesses and a notary. We can handle that once you're discharged. What if something happens before then?" "Don't be morbid, Arthur. You'll be fine. But if it gives you peace of mind, we can outline the changes now and formalize them later." We were discussing the specifics of a new trust when the door creaked open. I assumed it was a nurse, but it was Isabella. She stopped short upon seeing Gerald. "Oh, I'm sorry. You have a guest. I'll come back." "No, Isabella, please come in," I said, stopping her. "This is Gerald Vance, our company's lawyer." She entered the room, her smile strained. "A pleasure," she said, offering a limp hand. "Isabella Sterling, Leo's wife." "Gerald Vance," he replied curtly, barely grazing her hand with his. "Arthur and I were just discussing some legal matters." "What sort of matters?" she asked, her curiosity piqued. "Business," I answered vaguely. "A power of attorney for Frank, to keep things running while I recover." "Shouldn't Leo be handling that?" she challenged, her voice hardening. "He is your son, your heir. It would be logical for him to step in. Leo has no experience running the company. Frank knows it inside and out." "But it's a family business," she insisted, a clear note of frustration in her voice. I woke up from a nap a few days later feeling groggy. My head was fuzzy from the new medication they'd put me on. I needed my phone to call Frank, to ask if Leo or Isabella had made any more moves. I buzzed the nurse, who retrieved it from the lockbox with my personal effects. I was about to dial when I heard familiar voices drifting down the hall. It was Isabella and her mother, Sylvia. They paused just outside my door, likely thinking I was still asleep or in a therapy session. "Are you certain he's in therapy now?" Sylvia asked. "Yes, I checked the schedule. He won't be back for another hour," Isabella lied. We can talk freely. I held my breath, straining to hear every word. That lawyer worries me, Sylvia said. Vance. He's too sharp. He clearly doesn't trust us. He's always been fiercely loyal to Arthur, Isabella replied dismissively. But it doesn't matter. What matters is that the old man gave full power of attorney to his deputy, not to Leo. Is that a major setback? It complicates things. If Leo had control, we could start restructuring now. As it is, we have to wait until Arthur is weaker, more confused. A cold dread washed over me. This was real. They were actively plotting against me. You're sure his condition will worsen? Sylvia asked. The doctors say the cognitive impact of a stroke can be unpredictable, especially in someone his age, Isabella said. He'll be frail, dependent on medication. We just need to gently convince him that he's no longer capable of running the business. And if he resists? Then we move to Plan B. Isabella's voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper, and I had to strain to hear. I've spoken with a specialist Dr. Reeves recommends. It's common for stroke patients to be prescribed powerful medications that cause confusion. If we petition the court for guardianship, backed by a medical opinion, you want to have him declared incompetent? Sylvia sounded taken aback, but not horrified. It's a drastic measure, Isabella. We have no other choice, Mother. Sterling provisions will be ours. He just needs to sign one piece of paper. And if he won't do it willingly, we'll make sure he's in no position to refuse. Does Leo agree with all this? Leo does what I tell him to, Isabella said with cold certainty. He's always been soft, just like his mother. They walked away, their voices fading. I lay in bed, paralyzed by the sheer malice of their plan. Isabella intended to have me declared mentally incompetent and seize my life's work. And Leo, my son, was her willing accomplice. I grabbed the phone and called Frank, my hand trembling. Get here now, I rasped. As fast as you can. Then I dialed Gerald. I need to change everything. Right now, I said, my voice shaking with rage and heartbreak. And not just the will. We need an ironclad plan to protect the company. Arthur, what happened? Gerald asked, alarmed. I'll tell you everything when you get here. But just know this, you were right to be suspicious. Isabella and Leo are coming for everything. I spent the rest of my time in rehab playing the part of the frail, recovering patient. Isabella visited daily, bringing expensive juices and fussing over me with a nauseatingly sweet demeanor. Leo tagged along, looking haunted and avoiding my gaze. Frank also visited every afternoon after my family had departed. He brought company updates, and I gave him instructions, all under the guise of staying engaged with current projects. In reality, Gerald and I were constructing an impregnable fortress around my legacy. Gerald came twice, armed with stacks of documents. We meticulously crafted every clause of our counteroffensive. I officially established an irrevocable trust, transferring all company assets into it. Frank was named the trustee, granted extensive operational powers, but with rigid prohibitions against selling assets or altering the ownership structure without my explicit consent. This is airtight, Arthur, Gerald assured me after I signed the final page. Even if they challenge your competency, the trust is already established and functioning. Isabella can scheme all she wants, but she will never get her hands on the company. And Leo? I asked, the name a painful lump in my throat. The trust included a provision. Leo could inherit a minority stake in the company, but only after working there for a minimum of 5 years and demonstrating true commitment and capability, to be determined by a joint decision between me and Frank. It was a compromise. I couldn't bring myself to disinherit him completely. He was still my son, Eleanor's son. But I would not allow the empire we built to be pillaged by his avaricious wife. Dr. Evans was impressed with my progress and scheduled my discharge. I deliberately kept this news from Leo and Isabella, deciding to let them play their hand. I knew they would act soon. Sure enough, on my last evening at the facility, Isabella appeared. She wasn't with Leo. Instead, a slick, sharp-suited man with a briefcase accompanied her. She introduced him as Elliot Ramsey, an estate planning specialist. Arthur, this is Mr. Ramsey, she said, her smile not reaching her cold eyes. Leo and I felt you could use some expert guidance. I feigned a mild confusion. Guidance? On what? Well, you know, she said, perching on the edge of my bed and adopting a confidential tone. After a health scare like this, many people want to ensure their legacy is protected, that there's a smooth transition for the business. Where is Leo? I asked, cutting through her preamble. Oh, he had a last-minute client emergency, she said airily. He sends his love and said he'll visit tomorrow. It was a blatant lie. Leo simply lacked the courage for this final, despicable act. Mr. Sterling, Ramsey began, his voice smooth as oil. Mrs. Sterling has briefed me on your situation. I've taken the liberty of preparing a few documents that would facilitate a seamless transfer of the company's management to your son, should you find the day-to-day burdens too taxing. He produced a folder and placed it on my bedside table. I took my time, studying Ramsey. He had the nervous energy of a man out of his depth, his suit a little too shiny, his shoes a little too scuffed. He wasn't a top corporate lawyer, he was a hired gun. What exactly are these documents? I asked, my voice deliberately weak. A durable power of attorney for business affairs, Ramsey explained, opening the folder. It grants Leo the authority to make all executive decisions on your behalf. You would remain the owner in name, but he would hold all operational power. And the second document, he continued, flipping a page, is a conditional share transfer agreement. It would only take effect if you chose to retire fully or... He hesitated. If your health were to prevent you from managing the company. You mean, if I were declared incompetent? I asked directly. Isabella flinched. Ramsey cleared his throat. It is merely standard legal boilerplate, Mr. Sterling. A precaution. Of course, Arthur, Isabella cooed, placing a cold hand on my arm. It's just for your protection. We all pray for your full recovery. But while you rest, Leo can handle the stress. You need peace. I looked from the papers to Isabella, then to Ramsey. They waited, their faces masks of feigned concern. They thought I was a confused old man, weakened by a stroke, ready to be manipulated. May I review these? I asked, reaching for the folder. Ramsey eagerly handed it over. I scanned the pages slowly, pretending to struggle with the legal jargon. So many complex terms, I murmured. I'm not sure I follow. I can clarify any point, Ramsey offered. No need, I said, handing the folder back. I'll have my lawyer review them before I sign anything. Your lawyer? Isabella's composure cracked. Arthur, that's not necessary. Mr. Ramsey is an expert. These are standard forms. Nevertheless, I insist Gerald Vance looks them over. He's handled my affairs for 40 years. But that will take time, she protested. You're being discharged soon. It would be so much more efficient to settle this now. I am in no hurry, I said calmly. If the documents are as standard as you say, Gerald will confirm it and I will sign. Isabella was visibly seething, but forced a smile. Of course, Arthur. Whatever makes you comfortable. She exchanged a look with Ramsey. Perhaps we could invite Mr. Vance here now, the lawyer suggested, clearly wanting to keep control of the situation. They were afraid of what Gerald might find. An excellent idea, I agreed, playing along. I reached for my phone, dialed Gerald's number, and put it on speaker. Gerald Vance speaking. Gerald, it's Arthur. I need you to come to the rehab center. Isabella and her lawyer are here with some documents they want me to sign. Documents? I could hear the suspicion in his voice. A power of attorney for Leo, and some sort of share transfer agreement. Arthur, do not sign a single thing until I get there, Gerald commanded. I'm on my way. 30 minutes. I hung up. Isabella looked trapped. Ramsey nervously fiddled with his briefcase. Perhaps we should reschedule, he mumbled. No, stay, I said, fixing him with a stare. Gerald will be here shortly. As a professional, I'm sure you want to ensure this is all handled properly. When Gerald strode into the room, the tension became palpable. He gave me a slight nod, greeted Isabella coolly, and turned to Ramsey. Let me see the documents you've brought for my client. Ramsey reluctantly surrendered the folder. Gerald scanned the pages, his expression unreadable. But I, who knew him so well, saw the tightening of his jaw. Mr. Ramsey, he said finally, closing the folder. These documents are predatory. The power of attorney is dangerously broad, and this share transfer agreement effectively strips my client of all control while he retains all liability. That is standard language, Ramsey stammered. No, it is not, Gerald cut him off. I have practiced corporate law for over 4 decades. No ethical lawyer would draft such a one-sided agreement unless they were acting solely in the interests of a third party, not the signatory. Isabella shot to her feet. What are you implying? Mr. Vance? We are only trying to help Arthur. Then it's peculiar you brought your own lawyer instead of consulting with me, who has represented Mr. Sterling's interests for years, Gerald countered. We didn't want to trouble you, Isabella retorted, clutching her purse. We wanted this to be as simple and comfortable for Arthur as possible. Comfortable? Gerald raised an eyebrow. By having him sign away his life's work? It was time. I had let them walk into the trap. Now I would spring it. Isabella, I said, and my voice was not the weak mumble of a stroke victim, but the firm, clear tone of a CEO. I know all about your plan to have me declared incompetent if I refused to sign. I heard you discussing it with your mother in the hallway. Her face went white. Her eyes widened in horror. What? No. You must have misheard. A misunderstanding. I understood perfectly, I interrupted. And I also understood that my own son, Leo, allowed you to plot this betrayal. You are being cruel to Leo, she deflected. He cares for you. So much that you were prepared to have me committed and steal my business? Do not deny it, Isabella. I heard every word. Ramsey, sensing disaster, began stuffing papers into his briefcase. I believe this conversation should be postponed. There will be no postponed, Mr. Ramsey, I said firmly. You can take your documents and leave. I have no need for them. What do you mean? Isabella's voice trembled with rage. I mean, I said, looking her directly in the eye, that while you and Leo were scheming, I was taking action. Gerald, if you would. My old friend nodded, pulling his own folder from his briefcase. Mr. Sterling has established an irrevocable trust. All assets of Sterling Provisions have been transferred into it. Mr. Frank Miller has been appointed the sole trustee, with a strict and detailed charter. No assets can be sold, transferred, or leveraged without Mr. Sterling's written consent or, upon his passing, a unanimous vote by a 3-person board of trustees, of which I am a member. Isabella stood as if she'd been struck by lightning. Her face was a mask of disbelief and fury. You can't. That's not fair. Leo is your son. Your heir. Leo, I said calmly, will receive a minority stake in the company, but only if he dedicates 5 years of sincere work to it and proves his worth. I will not disinherit him, but I will not allow you and him to destroy the legacy Eleanor and I built. You can't do this to us, she shrieked. We cared for you. We visited every day. You visited the company, not me, I replied. And let us be honest, Isabella. You have never seen me as anything but an obstacle between you and my money. She turned to Ramsey. Tell him. He can't just do this. There must be a way to challenge it. Ramsey looked utterly defeated. Trust law is not my specialty, Mrs. Sterling. You're useless, she spat, then turned back to me. This is not over, Arthur. Leo will be devastated. You will regret this. No, Isabella, I said, shaking my head. The only thing I regret is not seeing your true colors sooner. And I pray that one day, Leo finds the strength to escape your poison. She stormed out of the room, slamming the door with such force that a picture on the wall tilted. Ramsey scurried after her like a frightened mouse. Well, Gerald said into the silence. That was satisfying. Yes, I said, leaning back against the pillows, a profound exhaustion washing over me. It was. Are you sure about the provision for Leo? Gerald asked. I sighed, the anger replaced by a deep, familiar ache. He is my son, Gerald. The only piece of Eleanor I have left. I can't completely cut him out. But he will not be handed this company on a silver platter, especially not while he is under her spell. I understand, Gerald said. They will likely try to fight this. Don't let your guard down. I won't, I promised. I was no longer a victim. I was a survivor. Later that evening, my phone buzzed. A text from Leo. Dad, we need to talk. I'm coming to see you tomorrow. Alone. Please just hear me out. I set the phone down. Tomorrow would bring another battle in this family war. But for the first time in a long time, I felt ready for it. The following weeks were a tense, quiet battlefield. Leo and I had a painful conversation where he claimed ignorance of Isabella's most sinister plans, but he ultimately defended her concern for the business. The trust, he argued, was a betrayal of him. The chasm between us widened into an unbridgeable canyon. I learned through Gerald that Isabella had indeed hired a lawyer to contest the trust, but their case was weak. I focused on my recovery, slowly regaining my strength. I began visiting the office, first for an hour, then for a whole afternoon. Frank had managed things brilliantly, but I missed the rhythm of the work, the camaraderie of my team. One evening, I stayed late, wandering through the quiet facility. I ended up in the test kitchen, the place where Eleanor and I had created so many of our signature products. The scent of cinnamon and cooked fruit still lingered in the air. I looked at the gleaming copper pots, the rows of spice jars, and I was overcome with a profound sadness. What was this all for? The company I had built to provide for my family had become the very thing that destroyed it. Who would carry on this legacy, this passion for quality? not Leo. Frank found me there, staring at a pot of strawberry jam simmering on the stove. Boss, you all right? Just thinking, Frank, I said quietly. Thinking about what comes next. He stood beside me, the familiar, comforting presence he'd been for decades. We'll get through this, boss. We always do. But what is this, Frank? What's the point of it all if it ends up in the hands of strangers after I'm gone? Or worse, gets dismantled by someone like Isabella? His words from that night echoed in my mind. He spoke of the employees, the people who had been with us for years, who cared as much as I did. And in that moment, clarity struck me like a bolt of lightning. I had been so fixated on my blood family that I had failed to see my real family, the one that showed up every day, that shared my vision and my passion. The next morning I called Gerald. I've made a decision, I said, my voice firm with a newfound purpose. A week later, I gathered my senior employees in the conference room. I looked at their familiar, loyal faces. As you know, I began. Recent events have forced me to think about the future of Sterling Provisions. I have decided to sell the company. A nervous murmur rippled through the room. But I'm not selling it to a competitor or an investment firm. I'm selling it to all of you. I explained my plan, an employee stock ownership plan or ESOP. Every employee who had been with the company for more than 3 years would become a part owner. The company we built together would now belong to us, together. The shock in the room was followed by a wave of emotional, joyful disbelief. Frank, his eyes misty, simply shook his head in amazement. Boss, what about Leo? I have made other provisions for my son, I said. But this company, its soul, belongs with the people who love it. After the documents were signed and the transition was official, I went home and wrote a letter. Dear Leo, I am writing this because you deserve to hear it from me. I have sold Sterling Provisions. The company has been transferred to its employees through an ownership plan. They are the ones who have poured their lives into it, and they have earned the right to steward its future. This means you will not be inheriting the business, not now, not in 5 years. This is not an act of revenge. It is an act of preservation. Your mother and I built this company on a foundation of passion and integrity. It is more than just an asset on a balance sheet. It is a living legacy, and I cannot allow it to become a casualty of greed. I will not leave you with nothing. The house and a significant trust fund are yours. It is more than enough to build a life on your own terms. Perhaps one day, when you are free from Isabella's influence and the pursuit of unearned wealth, you will understand. I hope you find a passion of your own to build, something you value for more than its monetary worth. Despite the pain you have caused, you are still my son, and I will always love you. Your father, Arthur. I mailed the letter the next morning. As I walked away from the post box, a weight I hadn't even realized I was carrying lifted from my shoulders. The war was over. I had lost a son, but I had saved my life's work and secured the future of my true family, the dedicated people of Sterling Provisions. A new chapter was beginning, and for the first time in a very long time, I felt a sense of peace. What a journey that was. It's stories like Arthur's that remind us that family isn't always about blood, but about loyalty, respect, and shared passion. What do you think of Arthur's final decision? Was he right to cut his son out of the business completely, or should he have given him another chance? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story and want to hear more like it, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell. You won't want to miss what's coming next.